No grass, no water, and they're dying. One is lucky to make a few dollars if a cow is about to die, and a butcher is close by to slaughter it instantly. If the rains delay further, it will be a disaster.
In 2022, Ghana's Cedi was the worst performing currency on earth. By mid-2025, it's the best. A near 50% surge against the US dollar has left economists stunned and investors scrambling to catch up. But how did a currency once crippled by debt, inflation, and panic suddenly become the strongest in the world? What changed? Who made it happen? And what secret move triggered this unexpected comeback? Let's find out. Before the charts turned green, before the IMF came knocking, and long before investors changed their tune, Ghana found its lifeline in the ground. When the world stopped believing in the Cedi, Ghana didn't beg for sympathy. It leveraged the one asset it still had power over: gold. But this wasn't just about selling more gold. Ghana flipped the traditional model upside down by asking a dangerous question. What if we stop pricing our resources in someone else's money? That's exactly what the Mahama government did. In a bold move that drew both praise and quiet panic from global financial observers, Ghana introduced a resource-based currency policy. Local gold buyers, whether domestic refiners or foreign exporters, were now required to purchase gold in Ghanaian cedis, not dollars. It wasn't a suggestion. It was the law. Suddenly, the Cedi had something it hadn't enjoyed in years: real, organic demand. But this wasn't just policy. It was a strategy with perfect timing. Global gold prices were surging due to fears of recession and geopolitical instability. From $2,000 per ounce in early 2024, gold rose to an astounding $3,400 per ounce by May 2025. And as the world scrambled for bullion, Ghana became the new playground for gold investors. But unlike before, they couldn't bypass the Cedi. If you wanted Ghana's gold, you had to get Ghana's money first. This move did three things at once. It forced foreign companies to exchange dollars for cedis, strengthening the local currency almost overnight. It boosted the Bank of Ghana's gold reserves, which surged from 9 tons to 31 tons within 18 months. It rebranded the Cedi not as a weak, unstable currency, but as a gold-linked asset with real-world backing. This subtle psychological shift was just as important as the policy itself. For decades, emerging market currencies have been perceived as volatile due to their lack of hard currency anchors. But Ghana's approach said, our currency is not just paper, it's tied to something the world wants. And that changed everything. International traders, once wary of holding cedis, suddenly saw it as a ticket to profit. The demand pressure built up in silence, but its effects exploded visibly in the exchange rate markets. By the second quarter of 2025, the Cedi had appreciated so much that it drew global headlines. Not because of speculation, but because of commodity-driven currency discipline. And this wasn't just about buying time. It was about setting the stage for deeper reform. With reserves rising and foreign investors eyeing Ghana again, the government finally had the fiscal breathing room it needed to tackle the deeper disease: inflation. The Cedi's gold-powered rebound didn't fix the economy overnight, but it gave the central bank a weapon it hadn't had in years: leverage. Because before you can control inflation, before you can attract capital, before you can earn respect from the global market, your people must believe your money is worth something. Gold didn't just raise the Cedi's value, it raised its credibility. But credibility alone isn't enough. You can build trust, but if you don't defend it, it crumbles fast. And that's where Ghana's central bank stepped in, not as a passive observer, but as a merciless guardian of the new Cedi. Backed by gold and public belief, it was now time to strike at the real monster: runaway inflation. Once Ghana re-established credibility through gold, it had something most countries in financial distress rarely get: a second chance. But credibility, like currency, is volatile. It doesn't last unless someone is willing to defend it tooth and nail. And that someone was the Bank of Ghana, BOJ. Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue now. For years, BOG had been treading water, reactive, constrained, and cautious. But with the Cedi gaining strength and reserves swelling thanks to gold-backed demand, the central bank saw a window. A narrow, high-stakes window to do what had been avoided for far too long: wage war on inflation. And they didn't hesitate. In March 2025, BOGI launched a 100 basis point policy rate hike, bringing it to a steep 28%. The markets were stunned. No leaks, no warnings. Just a cold, calculated strike aimed straight at Ghana's greatest enemy: price instability. This wasn't a symbolic move. It was a signal, both to the domestic market and the international community, that Ghana was no longer playing defense. Inflation, which had once chewed through savings and paralyzed long-term investment, was being hunted with precision. It wasn't about easing public anxiety. It was about restructuring economic behavior. High interest rates hurt in the short term. Borrowing slows, credit contracts. But it also rewards discipline. It tells banks to hold cash. It tells investors to stop speculating and start calculating. It tells the world, we're willing to feel pain to protect value. And that's exactly the narrative Ghana needed. But BOGI didn't stop at interest rates. In a move that further separated Ghana from its peers, the central bank abandoned controlled forex interventions and switched to spot market currency auctions. That decision alone signaled a profound shift in mindset, from managing perception to trusting transparency. No more artificial caps, no more behind-the-scenes dollar handouts. If you wanted foreign currency in Ghana, you had to compete for it, publicly, honestly, and at market-driven rates. This approach accomplished two things almost immediately. It choked off black market dollar hoarding, which had long weakened the Cedi by creating artificial scarcity. It deepened the forex market liquidity, allowing price movements to reflect real demand, not panic-driven speculation. But perhaps most importantly, it made the Cedi look trustworthy again, not just to speculators, but to ordinary citizens who had watched their savings evaporate in past crises. People started holding on to Cedis instead of converting them at every sign of volatility. Businesses began calculating contracts in Cedis again. And that domestic confidence, quiet but powerful, was exactly the reinforcement the BOGI needed to stay aggressive. And let's be clear, this kind of aggressive monetary policy is not possible in isolation. If reserves are low and your people don't trust your decisions, a surprise rate hike just sends markets into chaos. But Ghana wasn't in that position anymore. Thanks to gold-driven inflows, it had a cushion. Thanks to strong public messaging, it had buy-in. So, when BOGI tightened the screws, there was resistance, yes, but not revolt. Still, there were limits to what the central bank could do alone. Controlling inflation through interest rates is like squeezing a balloon. You push down on one part, and the pressure bulges elsewhere. Without proper fiscal support, those gains would evaporate. Ghana's inflation monster had been cornered, but not killed. Interest rates could only buy time. Real stability, long-term, durable, institutional, required a deeper fix. The structure of public spending, the balance of payments, and the national debt profile all had to be addressed, or else even BOGI's best moves would become short-lived victories. That's when the government realized it was time to call in the one partner that could help clean up what decades of poor fiscal management had left behind: the International Monetary Fund. For many countries, an IMF deal carries a familiar script: desperation, austerity, and political unrest. But Ghana approached the table differently in late 2024. Unlike before, this was not an emergency cry for help. This was a strategic play, a partnership to support reforms the government was already preparing to launch. What Ghana needed wasn't just money, it was time, trust, and a credible external validator. The result was a $3 billion extended credit facility, spread over 3 years, that focused not just on loans but on discipline. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. First came the hard cuts. The government froze 65 billion cedis in arrears payments, a politically risky move, but necessary to stop the bleeding from legacy contracts and inflated invoices. Instead of borrowing more to pay off past promises, the Mahama administration hit pause, forcing ministries and contractors to re-verify claims and reset expectations. Next, it tackled the cost of borrowing. For years, Treasury bill yields had been sky-high at 28%, sucking cash from the private sector and inflating debt costs. The IMF-supported plan aggressively slashed those yields to 15%, rebalancing the market. Suddenly, it was no longer profitable to lend to the government just to recycle inflated returns. Banks had to look outward again toward private enterprise, trade financing, and real investment. Meanwhile, the IMF helped reinforce revenue mobilization efforts. It wasn't about raising taxes but broadening the tax base, digitizing the Ghana Revenue Authority, cracking down on tax avoidance schemes, and integrating small business tax reporting became high priorities. The goal was simple: make tax a normal part of economic life, not a loophole-ridden exception. But the real genius of the IMF deal wasn't the technical reforms, it was how Ghana used it to buy confidence in global markets. Investors, previously skittish about Ghana's debt risk, saw something different this time. Not a country reluctantly obeying IMF conditions, but a government owning the process. Ghana wasn't just complying, it was performing. That performance had immediate payoffs. Bond yields dropped, portfolio investment returned. Foreign direct investors, reassured by the IMF's stamp of approval, began scouting for new opportunities. Ghana's credit risk ratings, once hovering on the edge of junk status, began showing signs of upward revision. Multilateral institutions took notice. Even diaspora remittances, often influenced by perceptions of local economic risk, began rising again. But the most important effect of all? The Cedi stayed strong, not because the IMF was sending dollars, but because the market believed in the plan. However, belief systems are fragile, especially in democracies. Austerity hurts. Freezing arrears angers contractors. Slashing yields upsets banks. And when policy starts to bite, politicians often blink. Ghana didn't blink. And that's because it had something else most countries in crisis don't: a stable political hand at the wheel. The IMF can support reforms. The central bank can enforce discipline. But without consistent political leadership, none of it lasts. The reforms would have unraveled. The rate hikes would have lost meaning. And the Cedi would have been just another brief story of recovery, cut short by infighting, scandal, or populist backtracking. That didn't happen, because Ghana's leadership for once stayed the course. After a dramatic political comeback, Mahama returned to the presidency at a moment of national exhaustion. Inflation had devastated households, debt had drained the treasury, and public trust was fractured. Yet rather than diving into populist rhetoric or playing blame games, Mahama did something rare in the modern political world. He governed like a grown-up. There were no sweeping proclamations, no midnight reshuffles, no public feuds with the central bank. What Mahama offered instead was predictability. And in the eyes of international investors, that was gold. He respected the Bank of Ghana's independence completely, even when high interest rates angered segments of his support base. He didn't shield politically connected contractors from the government's freeze on arrears. And most importantly, he didn't hijack the IMF program for photo ops or grandstanding. Instead, he allowed technocrats to lead and quietly ensured they had the space to do so. This posture may seem unremarkable on the surface, but in a region where leadership often swings from reactionary populism to authoritarian control, Mahama's low-drama governance was a strategic superpower. Take the tone he set with Parliament. Instead of using party loyalty to push through short-term spending plans, his administration made the hard sell for fiscal restraint, framing reforms not as international demands, but as national responsibilities. It wasn't easy. Lawmakers resisted. Interest groups protested. But Mahama stood firm. He wasn't managing popularity, he was managing economic survival. And then came his diplomacy. Mahama's international engagements during this period were deliberately measured and focused. No flashy investment summits, no grand promises. Instead, he focused on reinforcing Ghana's credibility abroad. He spoke the language investors understand: institutional continuity, regulatory predictability, and the rule of law. Behind closed doors, he negotiated new bilateral trade guarantees, opened quiet channels with Gulf energy partners, and extended strategic cooperation with key West African neighbors to protect regional trade routes. In doing so, he expanded Ghana's soft power, not by boasting, but by delivering results. As gold revenues soared, foreign investors could rest assured that Ghana's export policy wouldn't change overnight due to a political whim. As inflation fell, businesses trusted that wage policies wouldn't be rewritten in the heat of protest. And as the Cedi gained value, they knew the government wouldn't panic and reverse course to appease import lobbies. But perhaps Mahama's most underrated contribution was restoring calm to the public psyche. After years of economic turbulence, people didn't just need reforms, they needed emotional stability. Mahama's leadership gave them that. His speeches were grounded, often blunt, but always forward-looking. His cabinet, though not without flaws, functioned with a clarity rarely seen in previous administrations. And his refusal to politicize every decision made him appear less like a career politician and more like a caretaker of recovery. The result? Ghana didn't just regain market trust, it re-earned the trust of its people. And that is the one currency no central bank can print. By now, you've seen the full picture unfold, not through a single stroke of luck, but through a sequence of deliberate, connected choices. Each one on its own could have made a ripple, but together, they created a wave. That's what makes Ghana's story different from most currency rebounds we know about. This wasn't a speculative spike, a lucky boom, or a one-quarter wonder. What happened to the Cedi in 2025 was the result of a strategic alignment of decisions across four crucial fronts, each move unlocking the next, each actor staying in rhythm with the rest. And now, standing at the end of that journey, what we're looking at is not just a strong currency, we're looking at a strong system. Because the truth is, economic miracles don't just happen, they're built, carefully, patiently, and most of all, coherently. This was a case of coordination. Ghana didn't win by doing everything at once. It won by doing the right thing at the right time and knowing when to pause, when to strike, and when to let one action breathe before introducing the next. That's why this recovery held together. Not because each step was perfect, but because each step had a place. There was a rhythm to it. First, one lever was pulled, which opened the space for another to move. Then another, and so on. No part was forced. No decision was reactive. Instead, each one anticipated the next. It was a domino effect, but in reverse, each tile holding up the next rather than knocking it down. And that's the lesson. It's not about having gold, or getting an IMF deal, or hiking interest rates, or having a calm president. Plenty of countries have those things and still spiral. The real power is in the order and connection of things. Ghana didn't just respond to the crisis, it organized its response. And in doing so, it turned volatility into structure, panic into planning, and a collapsing currency into a symbol of discipline. More importantly, it stayed disciplined when it mattered most, at the peak of its comeback. Because let's face it, most turnarounds fall apart not during the crisis but during the recovery. When markets relax, when leaders start loosening, when the illusion of safety returns. But Ghana didn't loosen. It didn't celebrate too early. It didn't get distracted. Even when the Cedi was surging, the government and central bank both made it clear, we are not done. That mindset is what separated this story from the rest. It's not just the return of value that matters. It's how that value is defended, extended, and managed responsibly. What we've seen, in essence, is a rare moment in economic history where politics, policy, and public patience aligned. A moment where no part tried to outshine the other. A recovery that didn't rely on hope, but on design. That's why Ghana's Cedi isn't just a currency anymore. It's a signal. A signal that coordinated strategy still works. That economic dignity can be restored. Those countries, especially in the global south, don't have to wait for external validation to fix what's broken. They can chart their path, own their resources, and write their playbook. Now, of course, none of this means the story is over. In many ways, this is just the end of Act 1. Risks remain, global markets shift, oil prices change, elections come and go, inflation never sleeps, and one wrong turn could unwind progress faster than it was built. But if the past 2 years have shown us anything, it's this: Ghana knows how to fight. But more importantly, it knows how to sequence its fight. And that discipline, above all else, is the true strength behind the Cedi. Do you think if Ghana can do it, any nation can? Is it the rise of Africa in its true sense? Let us know in the comment section. What do you think about this? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.